can't remember, you know. I think he trained me. He showed me how
Brother
to...
Brendan Dooley.
Yeah, he was the dearest, sweetest man. Oh.
So Brother Brendan Dooley was the man who trained you?
Yes.
And,
Is his name there?
No, but here we go. It opens with the yearbook opens with a memorial for Brother Matthew Connolly, the librarian, who died on January 22nd, 1978. And then you started in 1981.
81, so... Yeah,
We don't know if he died in service.
I think he did.
So
Yeah, I did
that
not
would have been
realize
3 years without a librarian.
But see, maybe that's just one of those things I forgot. I mean, I really have forgotten. That's why I made some notes, because I just couldn't remember.
But I did want you to tell about the, I'm just going to make this. I did want you to tell about the man who gave you the, who taught you to do the tours. Tell me how that went. The man.
Oh, are we on tape?
Yeah.
Oh,
there was a man.
Put these over on the other table.
Okay. There was a man who used to give the tour.
Let's see.
At LaSalle of the mansion, the Bourne Mansion, right?
Well, that evolved into part of my job. I started out as just the Academy librarian, and that was in the fall of 1981. Yes. Then, and upstairs, right over my office in the library, there was an archives. 2 floors, one for display, a room for display, and a room for storage of the archives. And Brother Roger Chingus was the archivist, and he gave the tours. Well, they didn't actually have outside groups coming in, but he would bring groups of parents or other special groups, maybe some of the brothers from other places, I don't know, but he didn't do quite as much open tours as what I wanted to do. But he was wonderful. I remember him as a very talented organist, too. He played the organ that was in the Bourne Mansion for all the chapel services. That's where we had all the chapel services. Once a week, the kids had to go to chapel, and all the teachers usually went too, just as a matter of respect. And he could really make that organ sing. He was unbelievable. And at the time, Mr. Bourne built that organ that was in the building. It was the largest house organ in the world that was in somebody's home. So it was quite a thing at the time. But for now, I guess, you know, for the days that 81, when I was there, it wasn't that big a deal. But it was nice. It filled that beautiful room with music. It was nice. But Brother Roger, I'm thinking he was there 2 years. It might have been 3 years when I went there. And he got transferred. So he asked me if I would conduct the tours and take care of filing the archive papers. Because, for example, you had a daily bulletin that came out every single day, and somebody had to keep those and file them up in the archives. And there were pictures coming in all the time from the yearbook people and other people who took pictures, and you had to put them in some place and classify them. So, of course, I didn't mind doing that at all. It was perfect. So I started doing that, and like we do at Connetquot, there was a move at that time for all the school librarians in Suffolk County to meet together and exchange ideas and you know, mix and mingle and get ideas from other librarians who worked in schools. And I was one of the few that went to every single meeting that was in a special library, not a regular everyday school library. So I was talking about that I used to give the tours.
The tours, yes.
And I got active in the Oakdale Historical Society and also the Dowling Historical Society. There were some tremendous people in these groups and who were busy with the history of Oakdale, and they had the history of Oakdale Part 1 and Part 2. Do you remember those? They're at the reference desk.
Yeah, sure.
And there was the lady that wrote that, whose name's not in my head anymore. But they were just amazing people, really amazing. So they all came over and we shared information and we went through each other's little boxes and shared photographs. It was just great. It was just such a exciting way to share the history and to keep that alive in the community, you know. I did it for some of the classes, if they were interested, if there was a history class that wanted to know a little more about a specific aspect of the mansion or something, I would try to do that too. One of the things that I always loved, if you go in the big front door, to the right was the brothers, or this faculty dining room where we all ate. And you had to go into the next room to get your food, and then you brought it back in there to eat. And both of those rooms had rounded corners because Mrs. Bourne did not like square rooms. She felt that people would get over in a corner and not be a part of the conversation or something, and she always had it so that her guests would always be around and facing each other and be together. The rooms were huge, but they still had these rounded places. And in the serving room, there were two of these rounded corners that opened up, and in the dining room where we ate, there was one of them that, I think one, maybe the other one did, I think it was just one. And you pushed a certain place on the wall, and the whole curve that was built out of this gorgeous mahogany or something, just beautiful wood, would just slide open. You know, it was like, whoa. And in there was this humongous wall safe that at that time when I was doing the tours, I could just open the handle and open it and show people, you know. And that's where they used to keep all their silver and I guess any serving pieces, things like that, that were really, really worth a lot of money. And they got polished and put back in there, you know.
Wow.
And in the dining room, the two doors that opened, they had the nice glassware and dishes in there. And it was perfect to store them there. They went in the kitchen and got washed and dried, I guess, and brought back and stored right there where they were going to use them.
Wow.
You know? And it was just so gorgeous, the whole thing.
Everything
done.
how you needed to be.
Yes, I always wondered if I couldn't design a house like that.
Right?
But no.
Storage is important.
Yeah, it is. So I just loved showing that part of the house. The rumor was, down the other side was Mr. Bourne's office, and it faced the back of the building. When you come into the courtyard, there was this huge fountain and everything, which, by the way, we only ran for, I think, Mother's Day and graduation twice a year, because it was a lot of money to run the fountain. But you'd go in the main door for the, you know, main hall, but over on this side was Mr. Bourne's office. And when I was there, it was the headmaster's office right there on that wing. And back in the olden days, when Mr. Bourne was there, rumor has it that there was another rounded corner, maybe a little bigger, and his bedroom was right over that, his bedroom suite. He had a sitting room and a bedroom. And then up over the main floor, facing the ocean, out facing the bay, was Mrs. Bourne's bedroom and dressing room and sitting room. It was just gorgeous up there. I went in that part once. It was just beautiful. But in his, he had from his office up to his bedroom, there was one of the doors that opened up, a hidden stairway with the little circular stairs that went up and down between his office. And I just thought, oh, that would be so neat. So if somebody came to see him, a bill collector, he could quickly run upstairs and they could say, oh, he's not in today, you know. He wouldn't be there.
Make your escape.
Right.
Quickly.
So, but there were so many just wonderful things, customized things about the house that were done that way. It was really well done. And they rebuilt the part where the cadets ate. I heard one of your people describing the place, you know, when they had their meals. That used to be a long, skinny, what did they call it? It was a room with glass on both sides and a big sunroom where you'd have plants. I can't think of the word, but anyway, there was pictures in the archives of this big long room, the glass room, and it must have been just gorgeous. But they took that down and built out to make the big cadet dining hall, and it was on the site of where that glassed-in porch used to be, and that was just a beautiful area. But it was more subject to the cold in the winter, the ice blowing in, the rain blowing in, and living next to the ocean breezes there. It's really murder on taking care of the wood building. So they built a brick dining hall, which is very practical, you know.
And it was warmer.
It was much warmer and well kept.
And how was the
And-
food?
Well, I thought the food was fabulous, but I gained weight there, so and I didn't have to cook lunch. But every day you had a full meal for lunch. You had soup and salad and a main dish and 6 vegetables and about 6 desserts to choose from.
Whoa.
Now, maybe the kids on the other side didn't have that. They may have had less selection or something. I never ate on the kids' side, so I don't know. When my son went there, we were talking about the dining hall, and I described that back in the back on the roadside, away from the ocean, was the military offices. And there was, I can't remember the years, I think it was 86, 87, and 88, 3 years. Our family lived on campus there for a while, and we lived up over the military offices. It used to be the old infirmary, and you had to go up these little skinny stairs, and there was a nurse's office, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 bedrooms and a bath down at the other end and a bath in the nurse's office. So the years that, no, that wasn't the right years. No, 86, because Brian was a student there part of the time. So I've got my years off a little bit.
So
But,
you're saying, so you lived
so
in the military office?
we lived up above it in the old infirmary, because it was outlawed as an infirmary because you couldn't get a stretcher up and down the steps. So they
So you have an
outlawed-
incredible memory.
And they built a new infirmary down further on the property where they had the PX, where the boys would purchase everything they needed and had their uniforms altered and things like that. And that, and the other side of
What
that
does
was the
PX
infirmary.
stand
Post exchange.
for? Oh,
So, yes. And that was a good place. You could also buy candy bars and stuff like that too.
okay.
You know, and stationery if you wanted to write home or whatever. One thing I really wanted to say though about the military, since I was there until '93, that was the last, I read on here somewhere, that was the last all-male graduating class that my son was in. And then I knew that they were proposing some other programs to expand the middle school and to expand the nursery school and kind of make it a all ages. And they started taking in girls at some point in that time too, and they had a good program. That one thing the brothers really did, I respect them so much, they really tuned in to students and to the most modern teaching methods. They all went and took classes to upgrade their skills all the time, and they just had amazing educational programs, no matter what age they were addressing. So
Wow.
I had a feeling that they were well done, but for some reason the time had kind of petered out for military schools. And I always thought myself, I never said it to anybody, and like I told you, maybe it's not politically correct, but I think the newer brothers who were coming in, they were younger, and they had newer ideas and good education ideas, but they didn't particularly like the military. They thought that was too warlike or something. And I understood how they felt, but on the other hand, I think all of us on the faculty felt that the military program just really gave the structure to the whole thing. The kids had to be here, they had to be here, they had to do this and this, and in between was this wonderful education in that setting.
Very nice.
And when you took away the setting and the structure that you had to be up at a certain time and you had to be in bed at a certain time, and this, when you kind of diluted that and eventually kind of didn't do it, because they took in kids in the high school who were not in the military program and lived over in another dorm that was run totally differently, I think that took some of the magic out of it for me. That's just me, and it doesn't have to be the attitude that most people would have, but I felt that was an important part. And I always thought that the military people told us, they were also, like the brothers, everybody respected them the most on the campus. The brothers and the military men had the just highest regard. They were held in, really high esteem by the students. And they always told us that the purpose of the military was to keep the peace. And I believe that. So just to keep everybody in a peaceful environment and get along, because your expectations were set and limited.
Right.
And within that, you could be all creative and wonderful as much as you wanted to, you know.
Right, right.
But,
That's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, I just thought it was a good thing. So anyway, in the library, my big claim to fame there, and I guess I should brag.
Go ahead.
I wrote a grant. One of our parents wanted to donate some money. So he said, I just need a grant proposal. So I wrote a grant proposal to computerize the library. And when you worked with me at Connetquot, you think, you designed a computer system? Are you kidding me? But anyway, yes, I did. So at that time, you imported records from OCLC or some other place where you could buy the records for the bibliographic records for the books. And so I wrote up the cost of all the equipment, the computers we would need, the subscription for OCLC, you know, all the stuff that we had to do to computerize. And I'm trying to think, I bet I didn't have more than 30,000 volumes. But still, it was a really nice collection and very well suited for the courses that we taught and the projects that were required, research and stuff. So we set about to computerize the thing. I had no idea after they gave us the money, I think it was either 88 or 89 that we got the money and bought the equipment and set it all up. But nobody told me how long it takes to sit down and do this, actually. Put every book there and download the record and whatever. Oh, so at that time, a very special man came along, Mr. Tom Costello, and he was the brother-in-law of Father Perini, who was the chaplain on the campus. And he lived right there in Idle Hour. And he had retired as one of the supervisors, management people with the MTA, and he wanted a challenging job. And so he came to talk to me one day, and I said, do I have a challenging job for you? So he sat down and downloaded every one of those book records for all of my books. It was amazing. It was just amazing.
That
so
is.
Then we had computerized card catalogs, and all the books were on there, and we could check them in and out and everything. It was just amazing. It was like a real library, you know. It was just amazing.
Right.
So I was really,
And
really
he was
proud
in
of
his
him.
element.
So he was. He loved it. And he would come in on Saturdays and Sundays and work when we weren't there, and the whole thing. He was just so happy doing this.
Wow.
So see how it worked out?
Yeah.
So then my next job, well, I came to work at Connetquot because I did a research class for, I think it was juniors and 8th or 9th graders. The 8th and 9th grade did the history of their hometown or wherever they were from. If it was a village or something in South America, we would do the more like the state, you know, bigger. But and then in the upper grades, they did another project. I can't remember. I think that was more we did. Oh, I went to Connetquot to research the program, the information for the kids who didn't have home to go home to on the weekends, because we had a lot of foreign students who lived there and they had no other library access. So I would go, and if they wanted to write on, I don't know, whatever topic, I would look it up. Remember the old Xerox things that we had in the drawers?
Those cartridges?
The cartridges,
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
put it on the machine, and then you take the pictures and all that.
Wow.
Well, I spent hours at Connetquot after school hours going up there and doing, and I would get the information, and then they would write their paper and give the, you know, bibliographic information and all that. But as a result, I got to know almost all the librarians at Connetquot because they would help me or give me other places to go for research. And then Connetquot started getting those social issues resource series.
Oh,
remember?
isn't that a great
The
series?
big gray notebooks.
Yeah.
So I got another grant from another parent to buy those for us. And so we had all of that information. It was just incredible for the kids to have real information that they could use firsthand without me going to get it for them. So it was some interesting days, I have to admit. It was really, really interesting.
Now, you had
So-
told me before that the brother who did the uploading project from OCLC, when you left, what happened there?
Well,
That was Thomas Perini?
well, Tom Costello was the gentleman from MTA who
okay.
did the OCLC project. I called him my cataloger, and he loved that, because that's what he was doing. But Brother Joseph was the librarian. I guess we called him the assistant librarian. And he had been a teacher in this school. Brother Joseph Ventura, what a wonderful man. And before him, Brother Brendan Dooley. They were just amazing teachers in their day, and then amazing workers when they came over to the library. And they both, in their turn, took charge of the magazine collection. And we had about probably 40 or 50 magazine subscriptions, because that's what the kids love to do in their spare time, was read magazines. And we did each subscription separately and kept up with it and subscribed so that we got the sale price. If you subscribe early, you could save half of the year subscription or whatever. And I had Brother Joseph, he wasn't too at ease about shifting jobs. And he didn't think the library would be as important or that he would feel needed. Well, by the end, he felt really needed. And he kept track of all the money he saved by doing all the magazine subscriptions, because he was a math teacher, so he would, right? So he had all this big bunch of money that he had saved by doing all the magazine subscriptions individually and keeping track of them. So I told him to take it to his superiors and show them what he was doing for the library. And he was so proud of it, and I was proud of him. He just did a great job with it. So when I left in '93, they appointed him the librarian in charge. So I thought that was wonderful, and he worked very hard at it. He really did. So he deserved it. You know, he was a wonderful man. So
and you left it in good hands, you felt.
I did. And then in 2001, I had kept in touch with Brother Joseph and Tom Costello for a few years. And one time we'd go out to lunch once in a while, or they'd invite me over for lunch at the mansion. And when they were having the mass that was going to end the time of LaSalle being there, I think they called it the decommissioning or something. But it was the closing mass to close the place as LaSalle Academy, and it had been sold. So I went, and it was a beautiful, beautiful service. It was like 10 horrendously sad funerals. It just can't describe how overwhelmingly sad it was, because everybody in that room was there because they had memories and investments way more than I did probably. But you just sat there and cried, you know, and then they took you into this big, beautiful, formal dinner and all that, and it was like, who wants to eat? You know, just, you know, but they celebrated, and we went out in grand style. That's all I can say. And I'm so glad I was the guest of Tom Costello and Brother Joseph, who were still working there in the library. And I was their guest for that evening, and what a special time. So it brings back a lot of memories, you know. Oh, you asked me about something else. Speaking of memories, was it 1993 when the school had its... What was
83, I think, was the 100th.
83, when they had the 100th anniversary.
And I believe they said that the Eglevsky Ballet was there?
Yes, they had a ballet. Oh, that was a ballet performance. See, I don't remember. I have trouble keeping the years.
Centennial Commencement.
Oh, that's it.
And
Yeah.
they did say that...
Pronounce the ballet, the
Eglevsky, yeah.
Right.
For the Centennial Celebrations, the Eglevsky Ballet performed in conjunction with the dedication of the Centennial Hall.
Oh, yes.
Other Centennial programs included performances by the Notre Dame Glee Club
That was wonderful.
and the Tucson Boys Choir, a stage-light production of Man of La Mancha and Yankee Doodle Dandy, and an organ recital by Brother James Loxham.
That was on that beautiful organ. And I went to that. Oh, that was amazing.
Oh, so they
That
were
was
all
amazing.
separate events,
Yes.
like for the
But it
Centennial.
spread out through the year.
Oh, oh, how nice.
And the most amazing one that I remember, we all went on a bus. Well, let's see, did they say, to this, the yearbook ends with a copy of an invitation to selected people for the convocation and Eucharistic liturgy at St. Patrick's Cathedral in honor of LSMA, followed by the Centennial Ball at the Waldorf Astoria. So, awards were given to John Sununu, former governor of, is it New Hampshire?
I think they showed him in a picture.
He was very nice. I went to the St. Patrick's Cathedral. We had a faculty section in the processional, and we all wore our academic robes and all that. Oh, it was amazing. Now, I didn't go to the Waldorf Astoria, but it was just an amazing celebration. It really was. It was quite.
So throughout that year, they planned different events
yes.
for the.
But when you were in this huge St. Patrick's Cathedral, and everybody that was in there was associated in some way with Salle Military Academy over the years, and there were a lot of them. The place was packed to the rafters. I mean, there were people standing across the back and up the sides, and it was just really overwhelming and amazing. It was just such an honor to be a part of that.
Yes, really. And I know you mentioned John Sununu. I know there's a picture of him in here.
Mm-hmm. He was a governor after that. I see him on television quite often. You know, he's a Republican, but he's still on TV pretty often.
Right. Wasn't he something for
Mm-hmm.
Nixon?
Maybe. He was a student there. He graduated before my time, but he did quite well. The students in general impress me as really nice boys, and many from wealthy homes, but many from just average homes. You know, of course, I met the ones who maybe needed a little mothering here and there when they were away for the week.
Because you were one of the few women?
Yeah, when I first went there were 2 women on the staff, and I was one of them. So there was another reading teacher. And then over the years, by the time I left 10 years or 12 years later, it was about half women, I think. You know,
so now what would the boys do? Come visit you in the library, and you felt like you could sense that they were lonely for their mom?
I would ask what they wanted to read. If they were, wanted to read a magazine, some were into hot rods, or we had them on military tanks and things like that, you know. We had sports, and so you just kind of talk to them like you know how I am. I can't stop talking to people. So you get the magazine, and you give them what they want to read, and just a little conversation. Nothing in depth. I didn't really try to, take that much of their time, and frankly, they didn't have a lot of time either, because they had to be someplace. But we had them sometimes for study hall. They could get a pass and come to the library for study hall, and sometimes you could help them with their paper that they were writing, or proofread the spelling, or whatever. It was just nice to relate to the students in that way.
They do talk about some of them. Mm-hmm. One young man who wrote something in here said that his freshman year he didn't know how he got through every day. He was so homesick.
Yes.
So I guess it was
easily
important.
See that.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you're 14 years old, some boys aren't ready to go away from home.
No.
If very many are ready to go away from home at 14, that's hard.
That is hard.
Yeah, that really is. So, yeah. But I have to say, it was a wonderful place to be, and I'm glad I was there. I have to say, I never really made much money, but that wasn't the point for me. The first year, I had to drive all the way there, and I got home, and at the end of the week, I didn't have enough money to pay my babysitter. So I was like, why am I doing this? But it worked out. So I'm just really glad I was there. I had so much, I received much more than I gave. And that just really made me a better person, I think, for being there. I wouldn't trade it for the world. So, but